Hello and welcome to Underbated, the continuation of our previous podcasting efforts. I'm joined again by Majik because I couldn't find
Unfortunately,
a better co-host yet. You know,
he's
fucking
working on
times are
it.
hard.
I mean, he says he's working on it,
I
but
know.
I mean, can't still comes back to me. He goes like, "Oh, let's do it one more time." I mean, figured got nothing to do with my time anyway. But here we are.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the thing. Here I am granting opportunities and fun times and the necessary distractions from the workloads and the harsh realities of life,
Yeah.
And you know, I don't expect you to be grateful, but it would be appreciated.
Well, I'm playing Texas, so I think I've got half of that taken care of.
Oh, brother, you can't be playing Texas on the podcast.
No, don't worry. I've just finished up the thing, so I can
Oh,
log
okay,
off now.
okay. Fucking Texas, man. It's what day is it? It's the 26th of May, 2022.
So how long has it been since I last did?
Probably about maybe a year. It probably has been about a year, to be honest. For those who don't
Yeah.
know, the last podcast, The Ruminator and the Bullshit Artist, we decided that the name is a bit shit, and I think we all kind of knew that. Um, well, what do you
It's
think?
long.
It's
It's
too long.
long-winded. It's a sentence.
It's too much of a mouthful. The only
I
time
mean,
where,
it could be a
yeah,
book title. It's not a podcast title.
right, yeah, the sort of biography of two sort of old blokes or something,
Yeah,
Yeah,
like scam artist or something.
yeah. I think like unless you actually just sort of say, like it's like a name or something like the Joe Rogan Experience, the Tim Dillon Show, the Duncan Trussell Family Hour. Unless you do like a name, that can make it longer. That's fine because then at least
Well,
that's identifiable. But
we
if
have
you don't
we
want to do
we
that, you need
we
something
followed
short,
the
like impulsive. You know?
yeah, well, we kind of followed the sort of the pattern, the mold of the fighter and the kid of
Yeah,
the venerable Brendan Schaub.
yeah,
So maybe that's why we got like I think our peak views, uh, 20 views
yeah.
on number 9.
So
That's where it peaked.
thank Bappa for that one.
Well, I think it's because I put Crazy Frog in the thumbnail.
It probably is. Yeah, Crazy Frog is he's known for attracting
Maybe
strange
maybe it's the
energies.
topic actually. I mean, it is a
Okay.
funny thing about like the names. The titles. Like I did, it was creation, individuality, and the cause of mankind. That's
Yeah.
pretty big stuff.
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah.
that attracted people. Because Globalist Lives Matter, the one after that got 7. So, but also, the thumbnail of that is like a clip art cowboy overlaid over one of my one of my drawings. So maybe it is about the thumbnail because some of them definitely are better than others. Number 12 is probably the worst one.
What's number 12?
It was when I got an accidental screenshot from the hero creation screen in Battle for Middle Earth 2,
Hmm.
where I had this elf and I got his like face and I kind of moved it around and distorted it, did some weird shit. But it's just kind of messy and it just sort of serves as this sort of vague, colourful sort of background of the text on the thumbnail.
Yeah, I think you want something kind of like identifiable, you know? What was the
Yeah,
title for the Crazy Frog one again? Like creation and individuality or something?
creation, individuality, and the course of
It's nice.
mankind.
It really is nice how the two like clash with each other. I love that. Like an
What?
image of Crazy Frog
Crazy Frog in the
kind of
title,
just
yeah.
like distorted and like fuzzy. He's kind of fuzzy, isn't he? Like in that one. Um,
There is some interesting stuff going on there
yeah, yeah.
that sort of
And
is
then
the
then and then the topics sound like an
yeah.
Egyptian fucking thesis on life or some
No,
shit.
the juxtaposition is good.
It's per it's perfect.
Although I think yeah, that's the perfect like regular episode one, right? But then for like the for a guest, number 8 with Clouds, with an exclusive interview with Kruk co-founder,
Oh yeah,
and
yeah,
I really like how that turned out. It's so like heavenly.
that was great. I'm surprised I didn't get more views considering I.
18. It was the second most
Oh, okay.
seen one.
So
The
maybe I was
one
onto
just
something with that.
before.
Or
It was
you
just before Crazy
whoever said
Frog.
that. Whoever said that idea.
So those two, that was it. That was the zone.
Quite a
After
lot
that, it fell off a bit.
has happened since our last podcast, I'd say, but also not much. Um,
Um, well, I can tell you some things that have happened personally in my life. Some things that have
okay,
like
yeah.
uh, changed over the course. Like I've
You,
been
tr-
stretching, trying to reach my
yeah.
toes.
You transitioned.
S- Um, I didn't really shouldn't like.
Oh,
I
it's
mean,
too early. Sorry.
kind of
I.
awkward because like I talked about this beforehand and
Oh,
you.
I'm really sorry, man. I didn't. I
So
wasn't thinking.
I was saying I was trying to reach my toes, right?
Yeah.
And you know, I couldn't before, but now I can. From standing, I reach.
Damn.
Can
And
touch the
how
tips.
far apart are your feet?
Not very.
Like a shoulder
Not
width?
Yeah,
Like the
like
same width as
relatively
your
straight.
shoulders?
Yeah, relatively straight. Sometimes I spread them out a little bit.
Yeah, that's good, man. That's good. As
So
when that becomes easy, you should sort of like try and put your feet together.
yeah,
Try and get down there. Yeah, that's fucking progress, man.
yeah.
So
So
your
that's
back's a lot more bendy now then.
yeah. I'm able to like get that lower bit to go down,
Oh yeah.
and yeah. So like now I know I can do it. It's just sort of
You've
uh,
uncalcified your spine.
yeah. So that's good stuff, right? What's not good stuff
Okay.
is that I broke my glasses, guys, and I've been having to keep them together with glue.
Yeah.
Um, and you could say this is my folly because I had a test done and I didn't get glasses then. I was like, these ones are still fine. I'll use them until
You had a
until
test
this
done.
happened.
What did you find out during the test?
Eye test, just regular eye test,
Did
and
you just find out that you need
it's just
glasses?
it's just advised that I should up my prescription.
Oh really?
Um, so get new glasses, and that's
I think I
usually what
saw
happens.
an Andrew Huberman video about how to like improve your eyesight. Maybe you should watch that.
Mm,
Because the eyes are basically like a muscle at the end of the day, aren't they?
I've heard stuff about that.
Like if you sort of train them in sort of looking further and sort of discerning more detail, and you really sort of try at it,
Well, maybe if I lived on the Mongolian
I
steppe
think you can
and all I had
improve
to
them.
do was look at the distant skyline, which I would love to do. I'm really
Yeah,
captivated by
or like the
the
Tibetan
vastness of
plateau.
Central Asia. Yeah,
Yeah, and that's why
or
they
like
like
fucking
walk
Tarim
into
Basin.
those eagles so they can spot foxes.
Yeah. But given that I, you know, exist 1 foot away from my computer screen most of the time,
Yeah.
the trend is unlikely to reverse. But such is the world we live in.
Well, and this is the thing, we have to create the world that we want to live in, and you can do
Well,
that very simply by, just standing up more, or like
mm,
going for walks more, or
I,
putting back
well, I
that
do
putting
that,
back that
but
pull-up bar in your on that
here's
door
the
frame.
thing, Oscar.
You don't even need to do pull-ups, you can just hang from it and that'll like straighten your spine a bit.
I don't know what the sort of natural capabilities of eyesight improvement are, but I doubt that any like habit changing can improve your like change your eyes from.
Oh yeah, we're talking about eyes, not the back anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, my back's fine.
Yeah, you don't need to hang for your eyes. Don't worry about that. Yeah, what
No,
you should you should watch that video. I mean, I didn't actually watch the video. So little disclaimer, I don't actually know
well, I've
of
heard
the quality of
carrots are
it.
good. Um,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, if you want to see in the dark, um, eat some carrots. I had some carrots today in a little chicken
I love
casserole.
carrots. Carrots are great.
So, anything else happened since?
Well, I wouldn't mind that I have to wear glasses, right?
Yeah.
If I didn't have to buy them, but I do.
Mm.
and I wouldn't mind that if the glasses weren't controlled by a monopoly, but they are. So but I
Mm.
wouldn't mind that if
What if you
I
made
could
your
just
own
buy them.
independent glasses company? You
Well,
thought
that's
about
what
that?
some people, that's other people have thought about that. And I tried to go on their website. The prices aren't that much better at the end of the day. Maybe they are somehow part of the monopoly, but their whole thing is that we don't like the glasses industry, so we're trying to change it. Well,
Mm.
there's I've heard of shit like that, and I wonder, but at the end of the day, you they're not that expensive. Um,
Yeah. Plus, you
Plus, you can get
probably need
uh,
quite a lot of money to set up a
uh,
glasses factory.
yeah, it's probably a big investment, isn't it?
Yes,
They've got
yeah.
like a lab and everything. But it's all about the frames because that's where the price brackets are. And it's like designer frames are the most expensive ones, and it's like you realize why. They can supply like $1 glasses to Indian people, which will just they're not great obviously, but they'll do the job. And then here you got to deal with these price
Have you thought about
brackets, and
getting a monocle?
problem is both my eyes are affected.
Have you thought about getting like
So
just two monocles though? And then if
well,
if one of them broke, you would only have to replace one of them, and the other
I
one would
feel
still be
like
like
it's more
operational.
practical to have contact lenses at that point.
Well, yeah, but also, how many people are having two monocles? How many people are rocking that? It would be a look.
I don't think I would like to have a monocle though.
You'd look a bit mental, but I think it could work.
I think it's
Um,
just that I don't know how it's like. What are you doing to? Are you just like fitting it in like your sort of between like your cheekbone and your brow bone? Is that what's happening? And then it's just sort of sitting there. I mean,
I'm
and then
not sure actually. How do
there's a
monocles
little
work?
there's like a little chain that sort of wraps around your ear or something.
Actually, don't they have
It's
to hold up a monocle?
well, exactly. It's like some antiquated shit. You know, it's
Yeah,
not really practical. Um, so I'll leave that to Monopoly Man. I mean, I don't want to tread on his shoes, even though
fair
he doesn't
enough.
actually have a monocle. It's a Mandela effect sort of myth. He doesn't
So,
actually have one. But my glasses haven't arrived.
yeah,
I bought them online. In the end, I found out that they were apparently delivered. Um, well before I called because they advise you're going to wait like 2 weeks before you go and talk about a delayed package, but apparently it was delivered by Royal Mail first class. What I got to draw from that is someone stole it. It's very unfortunate. So I had to try and get a refund. Thankfully, that was done. So I got a refund. I bought the glasses again. Now they're gonna have to get delivered somewhere else where they'll actually definitely get picked
well,
up.
you can send them here if you want.
No, no, I've got my dad's
Oh, okay.
uh,
Well, that's
his
calm.
job.
That's calm. Um,
But big fuss,
do you think that your eyes
big
will
fuss.
just continue to like get worse, or do you think you can like
That's what tends to happen. Yeah. I don't know how much worse. Maybe they'll sort of plateau at some point. I hope
would
so.
you consider laser eye surgery?
Um, Maybe if I could afford such a thing, such
Yeah.
a thing would be affordable to me within
Well,
my
I've actually
lifetime.
opened up a laser eye surgery clinic fairly recently, actually, and we do it fairly discounted.
Oscar, if you ever actually make a business, I'm not going to believe you when you tell me, because you always
Five
say
hundred
you've
pounds,
just opened up the big
and
new
we'll do both
thing,
eyes.
and then I call the number, and all I get is some Indian guy telling me to put details
Yeah.
about, and I'm just like, what? I get very confused by them because they talk very quickly. But I think that's what they're trying to do. I think it's sinister.
Yeah. Well, there you go. There you go. What else has happened since the last podcast? What's happened in the last
Um,
year? Like, what's happened since
uh,
May last year? We went to Dartmoor. Went on some
yeah,
mad holiday. That was sick. Um, we did we did mushrooms, and then we
yeah.
went to Cardiff.
Those
I really
mushrooms made
enjoyed
me
it.
pretty queasy at the beginning.
Yeah, I threw up.
Oh yeah.
I had just stuffed
Yeah,
myself
you
full
were
of
worse than me.
sausages. I'd had like 5 sausages or something. Like I thought it was like Waitrose sausages, and then like a whole bunch of beans as well. And yeah, that wasn't wise. That wasn't wise. That
But
was
it's made me
that
think,
was
like,
great though. Like eating all that food, like waking up in the morning and going out to the
yeah,
fucking field and like cooking all that
yeah,
food.
we went out there because there was this bit wooden bit that there's this sort of bit of these woods that were fucking rotting with moss, uh, that we camped next to, and we realized that it was really windy, but if you stood behind the wood, it was just completely still. So unfortunately, we didn't, camp behind the woods, so we had to contend with the windiness at points. But it wasn't too much of a bother.
Plus, you can't go in the woods because you'll meet bears.
Yeah, um, but the thing is, it's very lots of plastic in there. I feel like the bears, they're looking for like greener
Oh, that was
pastures.
that was disgusting. We were on this we were on this
It's
mushroom
because it
trip,
was,
and we go
it,
into this little like there's like a stone wall that separates all these like trees and shit basically, and then inside that stone wall there's like a little path towards the other end of the stone wall, and I'm not really sure what the place was for, like if it's just growing trees for some reason, I'm not sure why exactly, but we're walking in there on mushrooms and we're going deep, and then like I can't remember if it was you or someone else, you point out that there was all these tubes.
we'd already noticed them,
I
and
hadn't. I had noticed,
yeah,
and then I looked
me and
around, and it
Dan had
was the
seen them
first time
before.
I'd noticed. And yeah, there
Yeah,
was like fucking like hundreds of like these like moldy, disgusting green like plastic tubes, fucking big as well. Like, you know,
but the thing is, the tubes didn't seem to. I would have assumed that those tubes decompose eventually, but I guess they have to be there long enough for the trees to bloody grow for course of years. So that it was old as fuck. I mean,
hmm.
those trees were grown and they were like on their way out. Like that shit was old. So God knows how long that stuff was there. But the tubes had just sort of been popped out by the growth of the things, and they just sort of line about all over the place.
It was
Some of them were
honestly
sort of
just
still around
such a
the
horrible
things
image.
and sort of falling apart. But yeah, it was very messy. It
To
felt.
notice that on shrooms, when you're like on this shrooms trip and like everything's like you're like in touch with nature and shit, and you're walking through the leafy path under the trees in the shadows of the sun, and then you fucking see all this man-made fucking disgusting plastic cylinders, and you're like, what the fuck is that? That's disgusting.
Well,
That's such an affront to Mother Nature.
yeah, I mean that the plastic things, it was unsightly, right? But I mean that's how you plant forests. So I don't really mind that. But
Yeah, not in Minecraft, mate.
what what I'm no, not in Minecraft. Just need bone meal, or just a bit of time. But
Bit of time
saplings,
and a bit of
like
love.
where do you get a sapling? What's a sapling?
What is a
You know,
sapling?
in real, it's sort of just an offshoot of a tree that you sort of. Because I know you can do stuff where you sort of like cut a branch, cut it in, you put in like a small branch sort of in there, jam it in, and it'll sort of grow.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and you can like direct branches growth that sort of way, stuff like that. But like planting a sapling to grow a tree, like if it's already, because you start with something in the ground, I guess, whatever it is, a walnut or whatever the tree is, um, acorn or a chestnut or apple or whatever. And then once it actually grows into a small thing that sprouts out of the ground, that's a sapling, and you can take it out and plant it somewhere else. And that's how you sort of get tree. That's how you plant trees. You don't start with the seed or bulb or whatever itself, but you grow saplings and you take them out and you plant them wherever.
Hmm.
But
I didn't know that.
I don't know that, but that's what I assume. Because I mean,
Oh,
obviously, for trees that do have like nuts and stuff like that, like that's the thing that the tree grows out of. Um,
yeah.
but yeah,
I mean, they're basically seeds, aren't they?
yeah.
So yeah, Dartmoor was a mixed bag.
What
Um,
bothered me about that wood
nah, it
though
was mostly really good.
was the campsite. You know, there
I
was
like
like
the campsite.
well, it's cool. Like oh, it's a campsite, but the fact that there were leftover tents and trash and shit. You know, like that's the messiness that bothered
Where were
me
there leftover
more so
tents?
at the campsite, not our campsite in the woods.
Oh, oh right, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, because we camped like a bit outside the woods, so
yeah.
and we got fucking harassed by some ponies at one point.
Oh yeah,
That
they were
was
quite
great.
aggressive.
Do you remember fucking trying to get them away? I was just fucking banging pots and pans.
Oh yeah.
Ding, ding,
Well,
ding, ding, ding. Yeah.
I I was fed up at some point. I was trying to cook my pot noodles,
Yeah.
and he was getting close to the butane tank, and I was like, nah, I'm done. So I sort of exploded a bit, and they sort of backed off. But then they were getting nearer again, so we came up with the pan thing, and then and then I got the pot noodles done, and then you guys went into the woods, uh, looking for Alex, and then I was holding the fort, so I had to fucking pan them away for good.
Well, I went. Well, I went to look for Alex separately from Daniel. I sort of went to the toilet and then I was like, oh, I might as well just look for Alex. And then I sort of went to like the other end of the forest. Sort of didn't see him there. Sort of looked over like the wall and shit, and I saw him like over the other
Because I
fucking
think
side of the wall.
you also went for wood. That's why for the fire.
Oh,
So
Daniel.
Daniel's probably getting yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah. Um, but we even set off separately, is what I'm saying. But yeah, that
Mm.
doesn't matter. And yeah, I think Alex has gone off for some reason or other. I can't exactly remember why.
Oh,
Um,
he was just having a trip,
yeah, true,
going through some shit.
true. Yeah, yeah. And then we went to Cardiff, which was sick. Um,
It was
well, I mean, it was
sickening
alright.
the fucking Burger King. I regret that. Well, I guess I finally found out that I truly do not like Burger King. But I mean that one was just the smell in there was horrible
Told you.
and stuff. But it was a bit overpriced and impressive food. I mean,
All
I
of
guess my
them,
instincts were right all
yeah, yeah.
along.
All of them went to Alex, Majid, Daniel. They all went to Burger King, and I, like a free-thinking, um, I don't know, prophet maybe. I went to KFC because that's where the big boys go. You know?
Well, I always go to KFC. That's the thing. So I'm
Yeah.
like, let's do something different. But
Yeah, but the thing
it
is,
wasn't
if
the right
if you're
choice then.
different, it's Burger King, then it's not good different.
Well, I know that now.
Yeah,
Um, but maybe it's the location. Maybe the smell wouldn't have been there. If I went somewhere else, I wouldn't have such a bad impression of it. But it definitely didn't impress me. It's not like because McDonald's was my standard, and then I was like curious about KFC because actually it had a bit of a different angle. It was about chicken, not about burgers.
yeah,
So eventually I started exploring that. But Burger King is just about burgers. So to me, it's just like McDonald's, but shit. And then there's other ones, but they're expensive, like Five Guys and all
yeah. I've only been to Five Guys like once, I think. Or that, well, I think it was Five Guys anyway.
that. Wendy's,
Yeah, America's got the whole own bunch of like fast foods that are
Wimpy's,
like not even known in the UK,
yeah.
but they're like known across America. Like Arby's,
In and Out.
Sonic,
Oh yeah, Sonic, yeah.
Sonic Burger, Hardee's, I think is one of them as well. Oh man, it's mad. Like I shouldn't even know about this. I don't think, but we're so
Well,
inundated with American culture that it's
well, that's the
impossible
thing,
like not to
that's
absorb some of this stuff. But I don't
that's the
mind that.
state of the world right now.
Yeah, I don't
America
mind
is
like
the locus of power,
well,
and we are in the American sphere culturally,
yeah,
and um, it's just simply the
I'd
fact
say
that
we're on.
all the
I'd say
stuff that's
America's on the
made,
decline though.
it is, and that's that's why one of the things that's changed since our last podcast was that now there is a war in Europe.
Of course, I forgot that even happened. And I was
Well, not
just,
just happened, but happening.
well, yeah. Um, who's winning at the moment?
So here's the thing, right?
Yeah.
Um, there's a bit of a stalemate at the moment. Russia is currently conducting an offensive in the east, trying to claim the rest of Donbass and Luhansk regions. Of Luhansk, there is but one, well, sort of twin cities that are left, um, a little nubbin of that region, and there's heavy fighting there. And what the Russians are doing is they're trying to cut off the highway that connects that to Bakhmut, which is the sort of central city in that general salient that the pressure is being applied on. So the Russians are trying to cut off that section of Luhansk and Lysychansk or whatever. No, not Luhansk. Luhansk is already a Russian occupation, but Lysychansk and Svierodonetsk.
Wait,
Um,
I'm sorry. This gotten too complicated already.
well,
Who's winning?
okay, so
If you looked at the war screen on on Hoi 4,
okay, well,
which
Russia is occupying Ukrainian territory, but they have, they tried to go for Kiev and Chernihiv and Sumy in the north, and they failed. So they withdrew from the north.
so do they have
So
more
the Ukrainians,
casualties?
the Russians have definitely more casualties. Well, I don't know because we don't
Significantly
know the
more?
figures,
Or?
but generally the pattern we see is that they have significantly more casualties. But that's not counting civilian casualties. And
Mm.
obviously, the line between a civilian and combatant is blurred when they were literally handing out AKs in the streets to people. You're kind of jeopardizing people's right to claim to be a civilian at that point, because any plainclothes person could be a partisan. And indeed, there is resistance behind enemy lines, because so occupied territory by Russia doesn't mean they control that territory, right? It
Mm.
just means that's where their troops are at that point. They've crossed that territory. You can say they've secured it. They've secured certain strategic interests, like the Crimea pipeline. That's an important one. So Crimea is no longer at risk of running out of water. Um, and they've connected, obviously, Crimea land-wise to the other territories and therefore to Russia. So that's a big thing. They're effectively trying to blockade Ukraine from the Black Sea, right, by occupying most of the coastal territories. But Odessa, um, I don't see it being taken anytime soon. If the Russians are struggling in the east, in the sort of Donbass and Luhansk regions, to sort of close that off, then I doubt they would be able to launch operations because they'd need to do amphibious stuff as well to get across all the rivers and the lakes in that region. So Odessa would be a very hard one for them to get. Um, there's also that region. You know how like Ukraine has like the bit under Moldova that like cock blocks it from the coastline.
Yeah.
That bit's connected to the rest of Ukraine by one bridge, and the Russians have bombed it. So I don't think they're planning to ever, go to that bit.
Ah.
But Odessa's not past that bit, so it's sort of just before.
Do you
In terms of who's winning,
yeah.
um, Russia, I think it's a sort of mistake. It's obviously it hasn't gone according to their original plan. What they're doing now is their plan B, because they thought Ukraine would just fold, right? That they would collapse, the government is weak, and they would flee, and people don't have support. And I think Putin expected more support from Russian-speaking people in Ukraine. Um, so given that the Ukrainian people have resisted so fiercely, and that Zelensky has stood, uh, as the national figurehead to unite the country and all that, and instead of fleeing, Ukraine has given itself a shot at survival, and now heavy weapon systems are being shoveled into Ukraine from NATO, and Ukraine is slowly turning into a military that has NATO standard equipment, heavy artillery, tanks from Poland, all sorts of shit, and obviously, the bare minimum of surface-to-air missiles and anti-tank missiles that they can use to stop Russian advances. The Russians failed to gain air superiority from the beginning. Uh, they couldn't consume Ukraine when it was weak, and now it's getting bolstered. So I don't think Ukraine is gonna like collapse to the Russians unless, if Western support ends, right? If Western funding ends for any reason, then Ukraine would eventually collapse because without support economically, the Ukrainian state can't function anymore. The
It's
economy's
like
halted.
a half proxy war, you know?
It is effectively a proxy war.
But it's like a half proxy war because Russia actually is at war, you know?
Yeah, yeah. It's because it's like a direct challenge uh, to the American order essentially. It's like really boldly just sticking out, and you know then there's this game that other countries play and like condemning the war and saying this shouldn't be happening. We need a quick resolution and all that. But then China and India and a lot of different countries don't really want to condemn Putin because secretly, they hate the US and they hate the American order and they wish to see it overturned. They wish to see a more multipolar world. But obviously, China isn't interested in going about it by, doing stuff like invading out of the blue without, real certainty of success. And they certainly can have certainty of success in trying to invade Taiwan. So I'm not worried
They could
about that
easily
happening
invade
at the moment.
Taiwan though. They could easily just
They could easily
send in
try,
some troops, bam, bam, bam.
but
But
it's not as easy as
it's
Hoi
holding
4
it.
makes it out to be.
Well, you say that, but I just don't think you have good enough
Well,
generals, you know?
would you have predicted that Ukraine would hold out as it has?
I mean, what?
That's been
How many
surprising
land
to
forts do
to
they
pretty
have?
much everyone. They have fortification. They have like trenches and
And
entrenched
what's their
lines and
infrastructure like?
positions in like the Donbass region where there has been war for many years now.
So exactly, so that
And
they've,
that's the hard
you know,
point that the Russians are trying to encircle and sort of pick apart and poke holes and
yeah.
destroy those positions. And
I mean, if they can damage the land forts, then
yeah, I don't think there's many. I mean, there's probably bunkers and that is
you
the
know,
thing. Artillery. Back in the day, it was like just get artillery in mass and
yeah.
just mass artillery because it was inaccurate. Now it can be fucking precise as fuck. It's a sniper.
I just think they should fight themselves. I just think Zelensky and Putin should just get in a ring
Mm.
and just hash it out like gentlemen,
Well,
and
I think they should definitely hash
not
it
have so
out.
many
Yeah.
like fucking young Russian and Ukrainian blokes and women, I guess, in Ukraine. Probably not as many women in the Russian army, but probably a few. But like this is what my dad was saying, like all these like people our age, like Russians and Ukrainians and shit with all this shit, and they're getting like blown up in tanks. And if they're Russian, all these people are
Yeah.
like celebrating, and if they're Ukrainian, everyone's like sobbing and shit. And it's like these are people who just like
Yeah.
they're doing what their country's telling them, and they're fighting and they're dying for basically no reason.
Yeah.
I
And
I don't
morale
get
is
the
low.
people who
You
just
know.
are so callous about like the other side of shit, like
Yeah.
um yeah, I don't know. That's kind of mad. Um, I guess yeah. To your question, I don't know. Like maybe Ukraine. I don't really have any sort of clue as to how good Ukraine's military is. All I know is that they already had like kind of experience dealing with like Russian support for the separatists and shit.
Well,
Like so
that's
they have
exactly the
experience
thing
with
because
fighting. So their army has experience, and the
yeah,
Russian army
since
doesn't have that
2004.
much experience, I'd imagine, because the last war was 20 years ago, and most of those dons are probably out of the army now. So,
Yeah. Yeah, the conscripts in the Russian army at the moment
actually, wait, didn't they invade
fighting.
Georgia at some point as well, the Russians? That was within the
Oh yeah,
last 20
yeah.
years.
There's been involvements. So in terms of experienced fighters, Russia does have them.
Yeah,
There's some of the Chechens, which I guess they were sort of a paper tiger. The Kadyrov band. Uh, they didn't prove to be very valiant. If the reports are to be believed, they sort of fled at first contact because they were freaked out by Ukrainian resistance. Um, but that was at the beginning. That I guess it was sort of a thing where Russian troops. It didn't really matter. They didn't need to be assured that things were going to be easy. They were just going in and doing their job, and it turned out badly. But Kadyrov, he was like Putin, you sure this is gonna be an easy op? Yeah, we're just gonna walk in. He's like, yeah, 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 don't worry about it. And I was like, cool, 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 because don't wanna. Yeah, yeah, no, you'll be fine. Just get in there, lead the troops. But didn't work out all right. Did he die?
I have no clue, man. I am not
I don't
following
know.
this shit at all. Like, at all.
Well, anyway, yeah, they were doing shit in Georgia. Uh, there was a war there, Abkhazia and South Ossetia.
I mean, like Putin
But again,
obviously.
the troops that were being used in the invasion were gathered from all across Russia. There were battalions that were just taken out of divisions, out of their divisional structures, and just sort of put on the border as just a sort of accumulation of troops, show of force sort of thing. And then, we were just like, we're going to move these guys in because we think we can get away with it. Was the gambit,
Yeah,
but it didn't go.
I don't think like many people who act like they really sort of care actually do care. I think it's
It's
just like I
you
think
know
it's the latest thing. It's like all these people putting Ukraine in their fucking like social media handle, putting the flag and shit. Like, and
yeah,
it's just like,
if you only looked at Twitter, you'd think, yeah,
I don't,
the
yeah,
Russia's lost the war. Like
right.
the mobilization, if you can even call it that, on the social medias
And the Ukrainian
is
flags like
immense.
flying everywhere over like shops and stuff, and like
Yeah.
people drawing it on the pavement, and like obviously
It's
not that I
a
have anything against Ukraine.
people love the sense of unity that they feel from it,
Yeah, it's the same fucking, it's
Like
the
we are
same
all
tosspots who
Ukraine.
stood outside on their fucking on their doorway and fucking started banging pots and pans for the NHS and shit. Like, not just the clapping, which is
Solidarity.
already like one thing, but like fucking getting a pot and pan because you need to be extra noticed. The fact that you're like not even being charitable, you're showing your fucking solidarity, yeah, but what you're actually doing is banging a pot and pan for like your neighbor's attention basically to make it look like you're a fucking good person, which is a lot
Yeah.
of it. Because you don't need to bring a fucking pot and pan. You can just clap.
No,
You can just
no,
clap.
you don't.
There's a reason why they're getting fucking pots and pans and shit. Obviously, that hasn't happened in ages. But I'm just saying it's the same. It's the same people. It is exactly the same people
Yeah,
who.
so obnoxious people exist.
Yeah, but it's
That's an
obnoxious on a certain
observation.
side of the political spectrum.
Oh,
I think. Like it's the
well,
so.
what side of the political spectrum is supporting Ukraine on? Because
I'd
it's a sort of
s- I'd
it's an
say it's.
issue that can be approached from many places.
I'd say
There's
it's
leftists who oppose it. There's leftists who go, ah, but actually
establishment.
Putin is trying to restore the Soviet Union.
I'd say
And then there's
the
right-wing
people
people who
who
are like,
act
oh,
like
Putin's not that
they're
bad.
very
And then there's right-wing.
concerned of like left wing establishment. That's what I'd say.
You think the establishment is left-wing though?
No, no, I'm saying the left side of the establishment.
Right.
I'm saying there's a right
Which
wing
is,
establishment and the left wing establishment, and I think it's like the left wing establishment, and that's like Labour, Lib Dems, that's like the Democrats. It's like the left wing establishment, people who are so pro establishment, so like mainstream, but they act left wing basically. You know, that's the sort of
right.
people who I think are the ones sort of really like pushing this because they're the same people who are really like pushing COVID and like you know get vaxxed, wear a mask, and fucking socially distance and wash your hands every time you use a door or whatever the fuck. And it's like I think it's the same people who are like really like getting up in arms about this. You know, obviously
Yeah,
this
I
has
mean,
been
it's
open to
the
some
people
conspiracy
getting up in
theories as
arms is
well.
always a vocal minority. Um,
Yeah, but then there's the followers. That's the thing. Like, yeah, those are a vocal minority, but then there's like the followers. The
right.
people who kind of just don't really care, and like, but this is the latest thing to like.
But here's the thing, right? So this is where I want to let's look at what are the qualities of this latest thing because they're not all the same, right? they're not interchangeable.
Mm,
Each thing affects everything differently at the end of the day.
mm.
And what Ukraine does is it's had an effect on multiple levels, right? So you see the societal effect where people put Ukraine in their profile pictures and in their names, with the flag and all this, and it's just something that people will do, um, because they feel, they see that this is happening and they're bothered by it. The European sensibility has been very shaken by the fact that, Europeans are dying, killing one another. This is very scary. Europeans want peace above all,
Well,
and
that's another thing. Like how many people got so up in arms about the fact that like it's basically like how many people got up in arms basically because it's like white people killing white people who
yeah.
like just like
Well,
barely fucking
you can
paid
frame it.
attention to all the wars in
You
like
can
the Middle
frame it
East and
racially. You
no, I'm
can
not trying to
frame it in
frame it
terms.
racially. I'm just saying like well, I
No,
guess I
no, no.
just
But
was
let me
actually.
say, let me say it, right? Because you
I
can
guess I
frame it
was framing it
racially,
racially.
which is like that, right? You can frame it sort of in basic geographic terms, which is just proximity, right? Closer things matter more. That's a sort of obvious thing, right? That applies everywhere.
I think people feel like they can relate more to like
Yes,
Russians and Ukrainians than they can to like an
absolutely.
Iraqi.
And certainly it matters to me more, and I pay attention to it because I'm like, fucking Lwów is right next to Poland,
Yeah,
and
big
the
up
moment
Lawal.
anything that involves Poland, I start thinking of my family. So
Mm,
that's where my sort of personal investment is.
yeah,
Uh, but then I'm just sort of interested because I paid attention to the Syrian civil war. I'm not oblivious to other conflicts around the world, and I don't think there's any, like this just broke out, right? And everyone's hearing about it, and you can think about the reasons why people are hearing about it and not hearing about the blockade of Yemen, right? Well,
mm,
there's obvious reasons for that, right? Why people in America aren't being told about the blockade of Yemen, but they are being told about the invasion of Ukraine. It's
yeah.
not a hard thing to figure out. But it's also about the subtlety of the thing in the act, because this invasion is a sudden aggression, sudden new conflict, not a completely new conflict. The conflict was there, but now it's been escalated. And then, you compare that to Yemen, which, first of all, people don't really know about it. I don't know much about it. You don't know when it started, how long it's been going for, how it's developed. Plus, it's, sort
All
of,
I know is that just like we're sending weapons to Ukraine to defend themselves, we're sending weapons to the Saudis to fucking
yeah.
attack Yemen.
And plus, by the way, the Saudi
Which is
army
one of
is
the things I want to
dog
ask
shit.
a certain someone about. See what their opinion is.
Oh, yeah.
I don't.
Yeah,
Should we talk about this? Should we sort of?
yeah. Yeah, go on.
Well, basically, was my granddad's funeral. Rest up, big up.
Rest in
Um,
peace.
yeah, all that good stuff. I think by now he's actually been reincarnated. I think it's
Oh,
been.
good.
I think he's had his 40 days in the bardo, and now he's probably in a new body now. And I don't know whether that necessarily means he's in like a baby's body who's just been born, or like he's back in time, maybe he's forward in time. I'm not really sure on how the time aspect works. Maybe you can just be a fucking like some Arab merchant in the year 1300 or some shit, even though previously you were like jetpacking around in the year 2051 or whatever. But
Mm.
maybe he's just like been born into just another guy who's like here now, which is also possible. I mean, that's kind of what they believe with the Dalai Lama. The Dalai Lama dies and he's like born into like a new like kid or whatever. I think that's basically it.
Yeah, when
Um,
he dies, they're looking for the next newborn
yeah, yeah.
who's the one. And China is trying to claim ownership over the new Dalai Lama,
Yeah, I didn't
trying to say
realize the
they found the new one.
CCP had the fucking knew how to find the Dalai Lama. But then
Well,
I'm pretty sure it's kind of random with the actual Buddhists anyway. I don't know how
well,
refined the search process is.
the Buddhist processes are thousands of years old. The
Yeah,
CCP's processes, couple decades.
I don't know. How long has the Dalai Lama been around for though? Because the Dalai Lama is different than like the Buddha. He's like one of like the sort of foremost kind of thinkers or whatever, or gurus, I guess. But he's not like the actual head of anything organized. I don't think.
Yeah, well, the Dalai
Or
Lama
maybe he
also
is. I'm not sure.
is just, as far as I know, basically a figure of Tibetan Buddhism. But it's not like, the Buddhists in Southeast Asia
Yeah,
uh,
they even give a
care
shit.
care too much, or Buddhists in
Yeah, it's
Japan.
like the Pope is to like Protestants or whatever, or
Yeah.
Orthodox. It's like
Except again, not even as official, but also official in the sense that, for a long time it was a theocracy that the Dalai Lama was the head of. So there's similarity in that
I
aspect
guess so. Where
to
where
the
was
papal
that?
state.
In Tibet? They have
Yeah,
like a
Tibet,
kingdom.
around from the city of Lhasa, which is the capital of
Yeah.
Tibet. Um, and it wasn't all of Tibet back then. Obviously, there were different polities, but they centralized control eventually, and the rest is history.
This, yeah, true. So yeah, at the funeral, my I met the Right Honourable Sir Vincent Cable,
Peace
who,
be upon him.
peace be upon him, um, who basically was the MP. He was an MP for the Lib Dems, the Liberal Democrats. He was also in cabinet from
That's the yellow
2010,
ones for people who do politics by
the
color.
or yeah, yellowy orange, and then
Yeah,
from 2010 to
saturated
2015, I
yellow.
think he was in cabinet. He was like a front bencher in Parliament in the coalition between the Conservatives and the Lib Dems. Um, and then from 2017 to 2019, he was actually the leader of the Lib Dems, um, which is like I think the Lib Dems is probably the third biggest party. Yeah, I think it's still the third biggest party, unless maybe the SNP is bigger, but I don't know. I don't know if that's true. I don't know how. I mean, the Lib Dems never get that much anymore. I think because they kind of a lot of people kind of thought they sold out when they allied with the Conservatives. Um,
Yeah, I've heard descriptions of certain people being more Tory than the Tories.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, bro, that so I basically went up to ask him if he would like to do an interview, and that's kind of why we're starting this sort of well, we're doing this episode again to get back into the flow of conversation and recorded talking basically. And
Yeah,
then next week we'll have the Vincent Cable episode out hopefully. God be willing. Um,
yeah. Zoom things, you know how it goes.
yeah, yeah, we'll have to test that out at some point. But yeah, so look forward to that, and maybe that, hopefully that will actually maybe garner a bit of attention. Possibly, possibly. Um, I mean, as I say, he's fairly famous like politician or whatever, and yeah, basically he was friends with my granddad, so he was at the funeral, and that's how I met him. Um,
Mm.
'Cause yeah, which is pretty mad. Like it's weird how
Yeah, it was a fascinating story
if
to
this
listen to, really.
podcast did become big, then people would say that I was with the globalists because they're like, wait, your granddad had a connection with
Yeah.
the leader of
Some.
the Lib Dems who was in the coalition with David Cameron? Are you? You must be a
uh,
globalist. You're a
See,
globalist. You're probably one of the 13 bloodlines.
here's the thing about small parties, right? They're not actually, they're not in the institutions so much. Now, the Lib Dems,
I think they are though. I think
they're
the
the
Lib
they're
Dems,
the
they're pretty
they are the
goddamn establishment.
they are the third wheel, right? That is true because they actually have been in government, right? It's not like the Greens, which is like a proper outsider.
Yeah, or yeah.
Well, Greens are an integrated outsider. They're a bit of they're a pressure sort of containment. There's a small contingent of society that really cares about the environment or whatever the fuck. Let them vote for those guys, but then everyone else, they can be reined into the big ones, and everything's all right. So there's these sort of extreme releases like UKIP, Green Party,
Mm.
but Lib Dems. they're a moderate alternative, but that only really applies to like London and some other places,
Yeah, there's a
and
bit of
like
a
rich London,
protest vote.
like not street London.
No, not at all. Yeah, the Lib Dems have a very specific sort of demographic, really.
Yeah,
It's not
which
too wide.
we happen to find ourselves near it, but
Well, my parents are definitely, apart from my mum, my mum didn't vote for the Lib Dems in the local council elections this time.
hmm,
Um, she said I don't think I don't think this. I think she said this was the first time that she hasn't voted, like in a vote like an election that she's eligible for. You got to remember that even though our generation doesn't really give a shit that much about like voting and stuff, and maybe that's just because we're young or whatever, but I don't think it is so much. I think there was much more of like an emphasis placed on that kind of shit, probably because they knew like old people and like not even people who are that old. Like my mum was born in like the late 60s, so you know people who might have been in their like 60s would have fought in like World War Two or whatever. Um, and people would have actually fought for like freedoms and stuff, and maybe we kind of lost that. Maybe that's why we don't really take like the right to vote that seriously. Because with my
yeah.
dad, he was saying like, yeah,
Well,
it's
you know,
it's it's kind of dumb, it's
secretly
kind of
we
whack
don't
that you don't.
believe that it really matters, right?
Well, yeah,
Nothing
my
ever
dad,
changes,
yeah,
and what are the options, and on and on and on.
yeah, well, exactly. Like it's just a bit. But my dad was saying like, yeah, like people died for like the right to vote. Like you should always like vote, like even if you don't. And here's one of the things that he did say that I actually kind of did like. I don't know if I'll actually do it because it's a bit long, but it's a nice sort of principle, which is even if you don't want to vote for any of the actual parties, go there, get a ballot, don't vote for any of them, and just like write something dumb on the paper or put a third option that
Yeah,
says like
protests
some
for it.
random name or whatever, and then you're saying to the people counting it or whatever, and you're saying to the statistics that the politicians can access later to see how many people turned out, that you are willing to turn out, you are willing to vote and engage in the democratic process, and you do actually value that vote, but you haven't been convinced, so you have to change.
That's interesting.
I am ready to vote, but I
Would you
can't do
like
it in good conscience for any of these options.
see? Would you support like a sort of institutionalization of like I'm dissatisfied option, like none of the above, you know?
Yeah, that'd be great. Well,
And then
I
that
shouldn't
would be
say that so
officially
quickly,
counted and sort of included, and that's something that would be interesting, you
but
know?
yeah, that would be interesting, but it would have to actually mean something. Um, but
Yeah,
in
well,
a way, like
I
that
don't think the
protest vote that I'm
spoiling,
talking about is
means
kind of doing that, but most people won't
yeah,
do that. But I
yeah. So
imagine more
that's
people might go and say, yeah, I'm dissatisfied. But if it doesn't have any actual consequences, then it doesn't matter. Like it has to have like some kind of penalty for like almost all the parties that aren't
well,
offering what people actually want.
shit. The only thing I can say about the voting system is it shouldn't be first past the post like anything else, please.
No, it really shouldn't. Like it was good for the time when like you know we didn't have instant communication and all this shit, and you actually had to send like a representative. I mean, even just the idea of representative democracy is less palatable now than it was
Yeah.
like 100, 200 years ago, because back in those days no one could communicate with you if you were in Westminster, you're the MP for whatever.
Yeah.
No, or the PM or whatever. No one can from Berkshire can communicate with you or whatever. Or no one from Scotland is gonna go down every. But now we have phone calls and texts and the internet and social media and all this shit, which has goods and bad sides. But
Well, here's the thing about it, right? All this technology massively multiplies our efficiency
yeah,
in astronomical ways, but then
but we
we
don't
need to
need.
learn how to use it
Yeah,
without like destroying ourselves,
of
essentially.
course, but we don't need anyone else to represent our opinion for us anymore. Is kind of my point. You know,
Right.
like
Yeah.
because we have the opportunity to instantly broadcast what our opinion is, so we don't need someone else to like represent that for us because more more often than not, I'd say, like the people who get in aren't actually that interested in representing your real opinion. They're interested in representing what they believe personally,
Yeah,
and it just so happens that the people who voted for them align mostly with what they believe, but not necessarily entirely. And they don't have the same interests either, because one of their interests, aka the MP's interests, their interest is to gain more sort of influence and power for themselves and have a more prominent position. And their interest is just playing the game of politics and trying to win it, basically. Whereas
yeah,
the people who are electing that representative actually want change to happen. And yet the campaign that that politician gets on to be elected like aligns with that sort of that that wish for change and the ways in which that change should be expressed or whatever. But at the end of the day, he is separate from it. He is not. He's no. He. This politician's never going to be as passionate about your beliefs as you are. You know, like because he's a politician. You, and this is why I think we do need to return kind of to a more direct democracy. You know, like I'm not saying that we have to vote on every single issue because that is a bit mental. Shit comes around. Sometimes you need like a speedy process, or whatever. Um, and sometimes you just don't have that much time or the resources. We can't have a vote for every single law that comes in. Laws come in all the time. They leave some of the time, not as often, obviously, um, but like for anything important, like you should have a referendum. You should have direct democracy. The people should be able to decide what they like. Like with Scotland, like the independence thing, like with Brexit, like with anything, like the people should be able to decide what they want. Like there's like 2/3 of MPs were like anti-Brexit, pro-EU, or they were Remain, you know.
yeah.
But as we could tell, like over half the people who voted, although it was very slim, the margins, over half the people who voted um, were leavers, were anti-EU and pro-Brexit. So that there's a fundamental disconnect. If you left that decision to the politicians, then every time you would have a Remain vote because they're all Remain basically. So with a topic, whether you agree with the vote or not, and whether you agree with the result of the vote or not, and whether you think that's a good thing or not, like the very principle of having the politicians being able to decide the country's future in opposition to what the country itself thinks is
Yeah.
ludicrous.
Yeah, well, you can't expect the outcome that was advertised to the public during the campaign as Brexit, right? To be carried out faithfully in that case. And then what you get is a botched, Brexit has absolutely been fucking disastrous in every possible way. And it's just been drawn out and it's left things unanswered and it's caused these supply chain problems. And many people would argue, yeah, that's what happens. You never should have done it in the first place.
Yeah,
Um, but if the decision was made, then it's a blatant failure of the government to really try to do it. You know,
yeah.
there
Well,
was no, it wasn't unity.
I
It was
I don't
difficult at every
think they
step,
expected to
and there's
lose.
incompetence.
I think if
Yeah,
they
well,
thought they were going to lose, they wouldn't have had the vote in the first place. To be very honest, like
yeah,
Cameron just put in that like promise at the end of his
yeah. It was
or
all
during
about
his like election
it's going to be a
thing, his
coalition,
re-election.
and the Lib Dems aren't going to let us do a referendum.
Yeah, so they said, look, if you vote us in, then we'll do this Brexit referendum. And to their credit, they did the referendum, and then it got the result that they didn't want. And then Cameron left, and they didn't have any actual plan for if that eventuality happened, any sort of game plan for if that eventuality happened. And then Theresa May comes in, who was also like Cameron, like a Remainer. So it's no wonder that like shit's gonna go a bit sideways. And then Boris comes in after all like 2 or 3 years or however long it was um of May sort of fumbling around and you know dancing and stuff.
Yeah,
Um, fucking.
I mean, it is ABBA. I
Yeah, it's true. It is a vibe. It is a vibe.
gotta allow it.
Yeah. No, I can't criticize her for the dancing, obviously. Um, and then Boris came in and fucking fuck Boris, obviously.
Yeah, he's a bit of a sleazy guy, isn't he? But
Yeah.
he's on that cocaine. He's on that having like loads of bastards.
Du-nu-nu-nu, nu-nu-nu.
So he's playing the game. He's like he's living the Robert Baratheon life. He's come in, he's ransacked the city, he's plundered the bride or whatever.
Yeah.
He's running around with champagne in his hand, bumbling, acting like he doesn't know what he's doing, and stealing money and
Yeah.
helping his friends and the Russians, and then blaming, obviously, Labour for all the inherent corruption in London and the financial system, and not investing in nuclear energy and being dependent on we've had conservative government for quite a while now. I can't starting to feel like maybe the way I see it, right?
Yeah, you can't
Personally,
blame them if you've been in power for 12 years.
if things aren't going well, if there's dissatisfaction with the performance of the government, there needs to be turnover, right? You need to let the other side have a chance and punish them for not doing well, and then switch again and again if it's not good enough.
Well,
But instead, they've just been winning elections, the Conservatives, and it's like, it's snap elections. It's been strategic, and it's been kind of, you could argue it's been subversive each time. But people do just vote for the Tories at the end of the day. Out there in the Shire,
yeah,
in the fucking in the
out there in
Hobbit
the
holes
sticks.
and the fucking the woodlands and the hills.
Yeah. But yeah, people will just, I don't know, it seems like people are just going to keep voting for them because a lot of, like, I think working class people have been especially, like,
Well,
thrown
certainly
off
people
from,
who are like into Labour and all that, and are vehemently anti-Tory. They're very dissatisfied with current state of Labour.
yeah,
Um,
definitely.
it's sort of echoes of Blairism and all that, just sort of impotent centrism.
Yeah, well, Labour isn't like socialist anymore. They're just like the big
Yeah,
Lib Dems, basically.
yeah.
They're like the Lib
It's
Dems if the Lib Dems had power, basically.
so it makes me wonder. Is there really a right and a left to the establishment? I just see it as the establishment. Now there may
Well,
be
it's
factions
like
in
the
it.
social. This is the crucial thing. It's
The
the
social,
social left.
right?
It's not the economic left or anything
Right,
like
because
that.
the
It's
economic system is actually the economic system is the biggest like rule maker at the end of the day. It's the basis of everything, and all the other stuff is sprinkled on top. You know, so it's the neoliberal, fucking globalism basically through economy, and
yeah.
that's the policy of the Europeans, right? What I was saying about the Europeans want peace, right, and being so startled by the Ukraine thing, and therefore then in reaction throwing themselves kind of not fully. Germany hasn't really invested; they haven't really U-turned. They still would rather their thing was change through trade.
Hmm.
So the idea was we'll trade with all these authoritarian regimes, and they'll eventually get better. They'll realize that democracy is good, and the
Yeah.
countries will change.
Of course.
We'll cultural exchange, openness. We'll wear their garbs when we visit them, and everything will be okay. But turns out that's dependent being throwing yourselves in the hands of Russian resources doesn't make Putin go, maybe I shouldn't try to exploit these guys further. Maybe I
Hmm.
should actually, these guys are actually serious. Because people who are sort of vehemently anti-Russian, they will go like, they might go, what the Cold War was isn't some sort of misunderstanding, right?
Hmm.
It's taking a principled stance and going, no, we can't, accept this sort of system. And I think it's a bit idealistic, right? But there is a relativity to draw there between, the Soviet system and the American system, and the American system won out in the end. You can say that's because it's more efficient, there's more innovation, so forth, and that has produced good results in terms of development. But it's also oriented in a specific way, the global system, where there's inherent exploitation in certain parts of the world, and then sort of unsustainable growth in others, and then actual booming in other economies like Indonesia, Brazil, South Africa, and all these countries that are not really recognized in the Western-oriented world order, right?
Mm.
Like the Security Council, most of the countries there are European, right? And
The
it's
the UN
like,
Security Council. Yeah, you got
yeah,
UK, France, America, Russia, and China.
yeah. So you
So
have
out of the
Russia,
four, you have like four basically countries of European descent, basically, and
yeah.
then China. Yeah,
And then in terms of like the actual political alignments, obviously Russia is anti-American alliance. So in terms of like Europe as a political entity, that's
yeah, that's
Europe excluding Russia,
yeah,
aligned with
obviously.
America. So France and UK and America are sort of
But
in
even just
alignment.
culturally, like there's still stuff that Russia and the
Yes,
rest of Europe will agree with
but
sort
here's
of
the thing.
culturally and just act
Here's the
as
thing.
like customs, which like
Yeah.
it's like there's no Middle Eastern, there's no African, there's no South American, there's no like Indian, they aren't on the none of those
No.
countries are on the Security Council, the permanent Security Council
And
anyway.
China was obviously a case of like where they begrudgingly eventually had to accept that China was going to be a China that politically was against them rather than a China that was aligned, which is why they were happy to give them a seat at the Security Council because they were an ally in the war. But that was the nationalist China.
Mm.
The communist China, they were like, no, 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 no. But eventually they had to accept it.
Well, yeah, because if you don't accept it, then you kind of lose legitimacy of the
Yeah.
organization as a whole. But it's in a way like I feel like it's not like they haven't. I don't know if they necessarily didn't want China because like it seems like American corporations have been in bed with China for ages. So
Oh, well, yeah.
whether or not they had any, they actually did or didn't want the China like did or didn't want China in the UN. I'm not sure. Like you think from a strategic sort of like world map political realism level, they don't. But if you think a bit on like an individual kind of corporations and corruption and money and shit, then there's lots of intermingling between America and China, and it's all part of this sort of that system that we were just talking about with like not so much China I mean, but like it's the system that we are emerging under where it's like we have this sort of neoliberal economy, you know, where it's like sort of basically just trade, but like kind of free, but at the end of the day, like it just devolves into like major corporations basically that own everything. But
Yeah.
then you on top of that you have the social veneer of like sort of left wing acceptance and sort of diversity kind of thing. So you have this very economically right wing, like like these rich people basically own everything kind of system, and then on top of that you have like the inclusivity council or whatever, you have
Yeah.
like this sort of socially left kind of decoration on top of it, and I think that's becoming more and more prevalent, and it's what I think is in a way it's kind of what makes people sort of turn away from Labour and the Lib Dems more. It's one of the things that makes people vote for the Conservatives, even though you'd think like, why are these working class people voting for the Conservatives? The Conservatives represent the rich and all this sort of shit, and it's partly because all this whole like that whole left wing sort of decoration that's put on top of it, which is being heavily pushed, by tech companies and all this shit, and by government as well. That is very like kind of repulsive to those kind of people, like those kind of sort of more like traditional kind of socially right-wing conservative types, but who are still
Yeah.
very much like kind of establishment people who don't really look any further than like the baseline level of like, oh, trans issues, whatever. Like,
Yeah.
but it's kind of a shame because
Well,
it's
it's a
just,
shame about that,
people have more power than they realize, but they don't do anything with it.
yeah, that fake sort of left-wing thing with the social sort of, social justice. It's sort of the closest thing uh it has like to an economic policy, that movement is reparations.
Yeah.
just give us money, you know.
Yeah, and like
And
UBI as well.
yeah, and UBI, that's a classic one. And I think it's the economics that are the most oppressive, right?
Yeah,
It's the fiat money system.
yeah,
It's the fact that the central bank can just in make new loans, and that is loaned money that hasn't been printed. They just invented it, just pops up, and your money becomes less valuable.
hmm
Everyone else's also.
yeah. So
And
maybe we should stop blaming like this war for driving all these prices up and shit, and start looking at the fact that
well,
no, but let's start looking at the fact that
let's
During COVID, the US printed like I'm pretty sure the US printed more like money than they'd ever done before, like during those 2 years of COVID. Like
oh
like
yeah, yeah, yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
the amount of currency they printed, like
Because there
basically
was
out of
that
thin air
crash, and then they
during
just
COVID,
funded
is is
the Dow.
is mad. It's insane. It's so insane. It's so much
Yeah,
money. Like 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 so
and
maybe that is
here's
having
the
more
thing
of an
about like the
impact on the economy and like prices rising and inflation
yeah,
shit than some war in Eastern Europe,
the Federal Reserve, which is an internal national institution,
which has
has the
no
most
government oversight.
impact. It
It's a
has the
private company.
most impact economically,
Yeah,
and therefore, it has the most wields the most power in the world,
yeah,
right? It decides whether other countries' economies collapse or succeed because they need to change the interest rate for some reason that they've thought of based on their Keynesian fucking static constants economical projections where it's like uh, so long as this thing remains constant and then projection and it's like beautiful, you're like, yes, let's implement that, and
yeah,
then stuff
yeah. And
happens.
it's not just the Federal Reserve. I mean, the Federal Reserve is like a and it's the Federal Reserve isn't even federal. It's a private company. There's absolutely no government oversight. It's like a it's technically like a government department, but all the people who are like the chairman or whatever, the heads of it, are all like people from the major banks.
Mm.
And it has, yeah, literally the president has no power over it, Congress has no power over it, the Senate has no power over it. Like,
Yeah, it sounds like the kind of like the Bank of England almost.
yeah, it basically is kind of the Bank of England, but that's not the only one that's like doing all this shit like internationally. Like you got to think that there's the IMF as well, the International Monetary Fund, and there's the World Bank, and
Yeah,
they do
but
a lot of this
at the
shit
end of
as
the
well, where
day,
they
at
what
the
they
end of the
do,
day, it's all in dollars. The Federal Reserve is the sort of pin holder,
yeah,
in the entire equation.
no, that's definitely true, but
In an
they
American-centric
all work
world, that is
together.
the case.
There's no
Yeah,
like we think of them as separate institutions, but they but in what way are they separate institutions? In the way that they have like a separate name and like this employee is under this specific name of this company or whatever. But at the end of the day, it's all one like kind of like it's all one kind of
it's authoritarian
like mob.
capitalism,
It's
mostly.
all one kind of mob basically.
Yeah.
Like
Oh yeah, it's a
like
racket.
yeah, it's a racket. Like the IMF is like comprised basically entirely of people who work in banks, and the World Bank as well, people who work in all these private banks, and the Federal Reserve as well. And they switch in and out all these different places. And you know what the IMF and the World Bank do? They give a loan to like an African country or some shit, and then the US fucking to like you know give them some support, whatever, and they have some mad interest rates, and they say on the loan you have to adopt these economic policies like more free trade and shit like that, right? Then what they do is the US ups like the amount of subsidies they give to their own farmers, right?
Yeah.
Say it's like hazelnuts, and like hazelnuts is the only thing that Sierra Leone makes or some shit, or one of the only things, right? They'll like Sierra Leone is basically dependent on hazelnuts and selling them at their own price basically, but instead they're forced to do this whole free trade thing, and then they subsidize the American ones who are also producing hazelnuts at like you know and they can produce it for the same price even though technically it's way more expensive over there and compete, and then the only thing that they can use to even buy back or like to buy off their debt or whatever is those hazelnuts. Now they can't even do that, and then they're even more in debt because of the interest rates and the money that they take, and it's whack. It is completely whack. And this is some of the stuff that we should be asking Vince Cable about, I think.
See, when I see all this kind of, it's chaos, really, you
Yeah.
know. And I think it's chaos that it's all these systems exist, and there's a difference between making an institution that's like the International Monetary Fund and making an institution that actually means something, that actually permeates time and upholds certain principles.
Mm,
Um, and these sort of, you know, I guess it's like, people running around like headless chickens sort of
mm,
thing. There's so many people, such large things all over the place, all involving all this shit, all, it becomes self-fulfilling, where it's like, well, you have to do this because that. Every single person in the equation is being told to do something by the overarching system that they are assembling themselves in, and it's leading them nowhere, you know. There's no higher level oversight. There's no entity that's going like, wait a second, guys, you've got it all wrong. You need to do it like this. There's no person who's like more enlightened than everyone else. Maybe there is and they're hidden, but I don't see it. And then you can say, well, maybe it's multiple people. Maybe it's there's certainly, the sort of web, of like moss or like
mm,
mycelium that holds the sort of earth together at the top.
mm,
You know, it's networks, it's associations, it's business deals, it's contracts, it's holdings, it's finance, and it's all connected and it's holding itself up and it's trickle up.
mm.
This it's anti-gravity, like a slime island.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. There's no one institution that you can point of and say it's them. They're the evil ones, you know.
Yeah.
But you can sort of tell by the same sort of people who say created this new disinformation board. I don't know if you heard about this, the disinformation board in the United States of America.
Oh yeah,
They were trying to create this as part of the Department of Homeland Security,
good stuff.
um, to basically counter online misinformation and disinformation, and supposedly just Russian and Chinese sort of disinformation, nothing to do with. Oh well, it might actually have something to do with. Just maybe it might have something to do with like
Oh,
conspiracy
one
theories and
little note on like information stuff, like um,
Infowars.
in terms of the information war in Russia v Ukraine, Ukrainian hackers are really pulling their weight.
Mm.
All those young lads there, are very patriotically serving their state now, taking down Russian websites and all
Yeah.
this, doing counter stuff, preventing Russians from doing the shit to them,
Yeah. I'll tell you
and
what,
it's
the
it's
one
brilliant.
group of people who aren't like blocking anything from Russia,
Hmm.
porn websites. They, they are they are accepting everything from Russia still. They
Oh yeah, well
yeah.
I would know. Sometimes I just somehow stumble upon the Russian one
Oh
without
yeah.
without knowing it.
Yeah,
I look at the thumbnail, I click, and then I hear Russian. I'm like,
yeah. Yeah.
how is it always like this?
Yeah.
I guess the only problem is that it's not Polish ones instead.
Yeah. But yeah, that fucking that disinformation board. I mean, how like that you can clearly see where the establishment wants to head, you know? Like
Yeah,
when like
Klaus Schwab and all that. It's not.
yeah. So
It
you
makes you.
yeah.
It's unsettling. You can't. You.
Yeah, and Trudeau doing the emergency powers in
It's
Canada.
fundamentally comes from a place as
Like
if,
he's the
these
chancellor.
people can be parents to the masses, which are their children,
Yeah,
and spoon feeding them, what they can have and all this. And it's just disgusting. It's just disgusting.
it is.
It's not on.
It's fucking horrible. And but here's the thing, you can it's hard to know because this group is nebulous, like who is part of it, who isn't part of it. But
Mm.
if you see the people who made that disinformation board, or the people who are so totally in on the whole COVID thing, and like, or just the people who do this same shit, the people who work with Hillary Clinton, or the people who work with like Big Pharma, whatever it is, like you see them do one thing, like try and create a disinformation board, the Ministry of Truth, as it's been popularly like branded. Um, you look at who was involved in getting that decision to pass or not pass or whatever, but people who supported that decision, and like wanted that
And who
situation
came
to
up with
occur.
it? Yeah.
Yeah, who came up with that? You look at that, you look at like what else they support and who else sort of supports the same things. Like, okay, this person's saying disinformation board. What else is he saying? Oh, this person's also saying disinformation board, and they're saying the same other thing as well. And you see those sort of same topics that are all like like supported by the same people and who all support each other and all have the same opinions and everything, right? You look at those topics and you're like, okay, so the people who support those topics, they're definitely in on it. Who are they funded by? Who are they supported by? What? Who else? Who isn't necessarily political, but who else, you know, supports those views publicly and espouses those views publicly on TV shows? What billionaires? What celebrities? And then you can sort of get a picture of that general group, and it'll always be kind of nebulous because there'll be people who are maybe kind of part of it but kind of not, people who like just have some mates who are part of it but they're not themselves, or maybe they go to the parties just because there's lots of famous people there but they don't really give a shit about the actual politics of it. And then you got the people who are deep into it who want to create the new world order.
Yeah.
It's hard to distance and like the different like
Well,
factions
it's
of each other,
because
but
it's also,
you can
it's
sort
all
of
about
tell.
favors, it's all about connections, it's all about
Yeah,
relationships. And it's like, people will end up doing things and having a hand in things that they personally couldn't give less of a fuck about,
yeah.
right? They're just keeping the money flowing, they're just making the world go around, and it's going in a certain direction because some people are really invested in pushing it. Like, I, you know, if I were to find like idealistic vision behind what the New World Order might be, right?
Mm,
I'd say it's something like this. It's like, you know, people in power can see that there are like big, big problems in terms of like the environment and the
yeah,
fragility of the global system of food, infrastructure and supply in parts of the world, in water and the future of that, and potential for conflict for water resources and general like resource scarcity stuff and all this kind of stuff, right? And just seeing that, maybe if we can just like cr- reform the financial system into something that we just have basically total control over, use it to decide how people live,
mm,
we can moderate the entire population to live within our means while maintaining the system that allows us to be fat cats
yeah. And
and
honestly,
without really addressing inherent corruption, without
yeah,
doing anything meaningful for the enlightenment of humanity, just keep things going and put people down so that it can just
yeah,
keep going. And a sort of mediocrity takes over humanity's course. That's the way I see it.
yeah, and that's definitely possible. And I think it's, I don't even know. I don't even know. I'm getting kind of tired to be honest.
Mm. How long
Um,
have we been doing it? I
about
only need.
about an hour and 20 minutes, I think, an hour and a half maybe.
I think we
Um,
can wrap it up
I think we can wrap
pretty
it up.
soon. Yeah.
Wrap it up.
Wrap it up, bro. We're gonna stop the illegal use of full songs.
Yeah,
Uh,
nah, fuck that. Um,
um,
so
although
yeah, that was undebated, and I'd say we actually did debate quite a lot of that stuff. So
Well, we try to
check
we
out
try
our
to
sister podcast, Debated,
uh
where we actually go and undebate things that we've already debated,
yeah,
and then we can go back on here and do the same thing again.
but it's on a 1 month delay, so you'll only see the
Yeah,
sister episode
yeah.
a month from now on. So
All right then. Well, that I think that was good. I think that was a good entrance. And I think we've just discussed quite a few topics that it would be interesting to get, Mr. Cable's opinions on, or should I say Dr. Cable? Dr. Cable's opinions on. He is a doctor, not medically, but still, he has the title. Um, so yeah, thanks for listening, and we'll see you
And
next time.
catch you next time.
Laters.